I say this, how many have heard me before and you came back anyway? Or you didn't know I was going to be here, did you? So it's great to be here. I had joined the chamber maybe 5 years ago, when was it? We were meeting in the Boston Coffee House. There might have been 10 of us in the back room. This is amazing to see what you have done. Good job building a very important organization. I was just talking to somebody saying we need more commercial businesses. We need more commercial building. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that this morning, about the way that we're developing. But this is kind of a silly slide here, but it's one that became really important to me last year. I've been on the Indian River Lagoon Council. I appointed myself when I got elected to that council. It's a really important group of people that's with a director that's been appointed by Governor DeSantis. And the council's job is to look at water issues in the Indian River Lagoon. Starts in South Florida, comes all the way up here to Ormond Beach. We call it the Halifax River up here. It's in trouble. It's a really important board to look for projects that will clean up water and then look for funding sources to pay for that. The last meeting, I was elected chairman of that board, which gives me access to a lot more information from the board. So I'm happy to be part of that. This, it's all our water. One lagoon. The reason I included these is because as part of the Indian River Lagoon Council, every 5 years the EPA comes down from Washington, D.C. and looks at what the council's doing and decides if they're going to renew their funding. We just went through that, and as part of that 3-day process, we had some educational tours for the people from Washington, D.C. And most of it had to do with the problem of keeping seagrass in the Indian River Lagoon. You probably all heard that the seagrass is mostly gone, lost somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 manatees because there was nothing for them to eat. So the manatees are like the canary in the coal mine. They're an indication that something is really bad wrong. Well, we're walking between venue to venue at this educational day. And there was a lady next to me, and she introduced herself. She was the owner of what's everybody's favorite restaurant in Kissimmee, Dixie Crossroads. How could I forget it? How many have eaten there? See? So we're walking, and I said, "How's the restaurant going?" And she didn't sob, but she started to cry a little bit. I noticed through the course of this day that she was very emotional, and she said, "Jeff, I've had to almost completely change my menu." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because the finfish that we used to be famous for serving, and of course shrimp and shellfish, but finfish are not available anymore." I said, "What? Why? I know the lagoon is having trouble, but you're talking about 60 miles offshore where most of this stuff is called, or 80 to 100 miles if you go to the steeples." And she said, "Yeah, well, the lagoon is the nursery. That's where the eggs are laid. That's where the young fish hatch out. And then they swim." So they're not born 80 miles offshore. They're born here, raised up, and then they swim out. And they're not there because they're not surviving in the lagoon, or the eggs aren't being laid. And so she made it a point of saying it's one lagoon. It's everybody's issue. At that meeting, there was people from estuary programs from California and Maine. And when we got to the final day, I relayed this conversation I had with her. And they both stood up and said, we didn't even recognize that, but we're having the same problem. The finfish in our area, way offshore, the populations are decreasing. And the reason is because in the estuaries, the nitrogen and phosphorus levels are so high it becomes toxic to the natural aquatic plant life. It dies and it's taken over by algae. Algae is toxic. Algae is toxic to fish. It's toxic to a lot of the native species. And it's also toxic to me and you. And so some of you are going to think Brower's just being reactionary, or I'm trying to scare everybody. I'm not. I don't want to scare everybody. I'm going to end up today talking about solutions. But we can't bury our heads in the sand. We can't just say we've always got the same amount of water and we're not going to have a problem. We have an issue right now and we need to deal with it. Florida, as you know, is growing rapidly. There's 1,000 people a day, maybe more, moving into our state. They all drink water. They all flush their toilets. All that stuff's going somewhere. And so we have to deal with that now. I'm gonna start by I'm going to talk about some of our springs, and then I'm going to talk more locally. Central Florida is known, Central and North Florida is known as the spring capital of the world. Over 1,000 springs that draw people from all over the world, from all over Florida, to visit these springs. And unfortunately, they're in trouble. Saturday, I went to DeLand Springs. Everybody goes there to eat pancakes. I did a video of it. I didn't plan on it, but I did a video on my cell phone. Please don't judge me too harshly. It was just Facebook Live. But I was shocked with it's only been a few months since I was there, and I knew that it was in trouble before I got there. But as I'm walking around with grandkids, looking at, you know how the pool is divided, the water rushes through, it's kind of a waterfall, it's neat. There's usually hundreds of fish around that waterfall because it stirs things up and there's things for them to eat. There wasn't a single fish. There's people fishing and their bobbers are just floating around, a couple alligators, but no fish. And then I noticed all the grass is gone. All the aquatic seagrass that provides oxygen for the fish is gone. But there's a lot of green. And people look at it and they see all this green and they think, well, that's the grass. It's not, it's algae. It's long, filamentous slime. Everything, the rocks were covered with it. The steps, looked over at the pool where the water's coming out of the spring. Algae everywhere. It's toxic to the fish. It's an indication that what's coming out of that spring is so high in nitrogen and phosphorus, and unfortunately some other things, that the grass can't survive anymore. And when the grass doesn't survive, the fish don't survive. And eventually, it's toxic to us. In fact, I just read this weekend that nitrogen, nitrate in the water, is very harmful to developing babies in the womb and young children up to 3 years old. It inhibits their ability to mature, to grow the organs. It's again, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I want to get your attention so that you look at this and say, there's something that we have to do. We can't just go along as businesses as usual. This is Waukulla Spring. It's in north of Gainesville. It's a beautiful spring, right? This is it today. Instead of being that beautiful aqua color, it's now dark green. It's dark green because of the amount of algae that just floats in the water. There's nothing around Waukulla Springs. There's not a city full of septic tanks. There's no industry. It's kind of like, who's been to Alexander Springs? Nothing around it. It's not a septic tank issue all around there. Now, there are septic tank issues other places, but what's happening here is an indication, again, just like what I saw at DeLand Springs, that what's coming out of the springs has toxic levels of nitrogen and phosphorus. And so it feeds the algae. That tells us that the water coming out of our aquifer that you drink every day is full of nitrogen and phosphorus. Every spring in the state of Florida, every single spring has nitrogen and phosphorus pouring out of it. That's from the aquifer that we get our drinking water from, that we bathe in. We have to do something different than what we're doing right now. This is the glass bottom boat at Waukulla Springs. There's no people on it because there's nothing to see anymore. Restoring the Waukulla. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is all the seagrass. This is what it looks like now. This is what Alexander Springs looks like now. This is what DeLand Springs looks like now. This is what Silver Springs, the largest spring in the world, right here, that you know, they used to film Sea Hunt there. They filmed Tarzan. Most of you aren't old enough to do that, to remember that. I see two heads nodding. It's algae. Algae has taken over. And when algae takes over, the fish disappear. This is a close-up view of not seagrass, but algae. This is what it's, the color that it should look like, but you can even see in this picture, there's a little bit of grass in the bottom, algae all over the top. The Blue-Green Algae Task Force was started by Governor DeSantis. They've come up with all kinds of recommendations 3 years ago. Today, the problem is worse than it was 3 years ago. And the reason is what I already mentioned about the masses of people coming into the state of Florida and the way that we're choosing to develop. If you don't hear anything else, and you can disagree with me, and I don't mind debating with you about it, if you don't hear anything else, please hear this from me today. We must change our development pattern, the way that we're choosing to build, where we're choosing to build. We cannot continue to drain, dredge our wetlands, bring in 8 feet of fill so that we can plant houses on it, and then put all the water that all the rain that used to fall on 200 acres, 100 acres, 6,000 acres, depending on where we're building, to put all that in a burp, a big, ugly retention pond, and think that we're adequately managing our stormwater. You can't put all that water into one pond and have it be cleaned before it gets to our aquifer. It doesn't work, and it's not working. I'm going to try and smile from time to time because right now this is a depressing message, but we're going to get to some answers. Let me depress you a little bit more. Silver Springs, the largest spring in Florida, its flow rate has reduced by 30%. Silver Springs, I think I have that's Silver Springs. That's not grass. This is a little bit of grass over here. All that other stuff is algae. This is Manatee Springs, all algae. This is one of the things that's causing it, is the canal systems that we use in Florida to handle stormwater become cesspools because of the runoff from lawns, streets, parking lots, full of nitrogen, full of lawn chemicals, all the stuff that we spray on our lawns to keep chinch bugs and weeds away. You don't have to do that, by the way. It ends up in the water, and it's like it just triggers algae to grow. It's what it needs to grow, kills everything else, but the algae does really well. The canal systems alter natural waterway. Can everybody read that? I don't need to read it to you, do I? That's why I put it up there. But you've probably seen canal systems like that. This is the Itchytuckney. Who's tubed down the Itchytuckney? Beautiful place to go. They're now limiting the number of people that can go on it because the very few sporadic amounts of aquatic, native aquatic plants there are so few they're afraid that we're going to kill it. It's mostly algae now. This is Hornsby Springs. Let that just sink in for a minute. A spring in Florida, a tourist attraction. It stopped flowing. And so they had to replace it with a water park at taxpayer expense. Rainbow Spring and the Rainbow River over towards Ocala has reduced flow rates by 20%. Same thing. A lot of most actually, of the seagrass that was there, the aquatic vegetation is gone and algae. 5 minutes? Okay. I'm going to zoom through these and get to, so this is Silver Springs, Florida. Okay. We have 5 outstanding waterways in Florida. 5 waterways that the state of Florida say are outstanding. These are so important, so beautiful. This is one of them. Who can guess what it is? St. John's River, thank you. Tomoka River, this is where I learned to ski. It's a great place to learn to ski because it's filled with alligators, and when you wipe out, you get up really quick and you just keep learning. Halifax River, not too bad of color there. I don't know if the picture was altered. This is also Halifax River. This is brown algae, and it's highly toxic to people and to fish, and that's what it looks like most of the time. I have a research project going on in the Indian River Lagoon just north of here that I brought to the county council. It was $62,000 for this world-renowned professor or researcher to show us how he is regrowing seagrass even in polluted water. The council turned it down, so I went out and just got private funding for it, and we now have that research project going on, and we'll be releasing some results for that pretty soon. This is Spruce Creek, a very important waterway, outstanding waterway. It also dumps into the Indian River Lagoon. I show you those because all 5 of those outstanding waterways are also on the state of Florida's impaired waterways list. And that's what this next slide was. You can't read all of it, but it tells you what's nutrients, too high of nutrients, fecal coliform. Some of them have high levels of zinc, high levels of lead, high levels of copper that are toxic. I want to get, in the minute or 2 that I have left, I want to tell you it's not all hopeless, but we have to act. We can't ignore it any longer. We have to do the work that's necessary. One is that we can reduce the amount of water that we use. Now, I hate saying that. I don't know how many of you know me at all, but I have 9 kids. They all take showers, really long showers. Fortunately, they're at the age where they're starting to move out, and they're taking less long showers because now they realize there's an expense to it. But Floridians use 50 gallons more per day than any other state in the state of Florida, maybe because it's hot here. But there's things that we can do to reduce the amount of water. Probably the biggest one is lawn watering. Reduce consumption. The most important thing, I'll end with this because I'm out of time. The most important thing that we can do is to alter the way that we're developing. I've brought to the council a proposal for low impact development. It's called LID. I brought in leading scientists from University of Florida to tell us about the benefits of low impact development. The council had ignored it. They said, well, nobody wants to do it. Well, that doesn't really matter if the developers, and I'm not against developers, but to tell me that, well, the developers don't want to do it, it's not just something else we're adding on to them. You can take other stuff, other requirements away. Low impact development means you don't go in and clear cut, you don't put all the water in a burp, that you have to actually treat the water on site so that it's clean enough that when it hits the waters that we enjoy, it's clean. Low impact development is now finally getting some attention. The last thing, and this is the most important thing, is I'm asking you to change the way that you vote. Most of you know that I'm running for re-election. This is not a campaign speech, and I'm not going to ask you to come join my campaign. But what I am asking you to do is look into my background. Look into the background of everybody running, and don't vote just according to a voter's guide. Just because somebody has a D behind their name, if you're a Democrat and you want to support them, just because they have an R behind their name is not the reason you vote for them. People say whatever they think you want to hear. We need serious people who know we have a problem in water, know that we have a problem in the way that we're developing, and we can change it. We can change our development pattern, but only if you begin to elect people who are not willing to bury their heads in the sand. That picture is one of the most beautiful places in Florida. This is what became of it, and now you can probably recognize it. Who knows what it is? Latitudes. Who said Jimmy Buffett? God rest his soul. Questions? Yeah, I would ask them questions. I would ask everybody that's running for office, well, what do you think about our current development pattern? Should we change it? Is it okay? What do you think about water issues? Because what I hear on the council, and I brought up, we're flooding all over this county. I don't know if anybody's aware of that. And I brought it up to the council, and one of my fellow council members said, well, you're just demonizing us. I said, no, I'm not. I'm bringing up an issue that we need to be aware of and to do something about. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, well, good. You should feel uncomfortable if you're not willing to do anything and just tell me that I'm demonizing it. So you need to ask them specific questions, and probably what you're going to hear is that, yes, I'm interested in responsible growth. We all say that. I'm interested in responsible growth. Well, define that. What does that mean? Should we continue to develop the way we are, where we go in and clear cut an area, pack as many homes as possible? Here's the most important thing your elected people can do. We need to learn to say no. When changes come, when somebody buys a piece of land, it's zoned, and they have the right, the constitutional right to build whatever that zoning allows. But what happens is they bring it to a city council or the county council and says, I don't like my zoning. It allows one house per 10 acres. I want to put 20 houses on that 10 acres, or 12 houses per acre is common. But you don't have a right to, you don't have a constitutional right to go in and get the change. You have the right to ask. We need to start saying, no, it just doesn't work. We can't handle the stormwater. There's nowhere to put the stormwater anymore. If you've noticed, when you drive around, all the retention ponds, most of the ditches, they're full. The county manager tells me we don't have a place to put the water, but yet we're still clear cutting and building. So ask. There was somebody in the back.
Yeah, that was me.
Fix the retention ponds through low impact development. It's low impact development doesn't clear cut. It doesn't fill the whole property full of houses. Now, sometimes they can put the same amount of houses on that property, but they push them all to one side, and you have very close neighbors. Apparently, there's a good market for that. I live on a farm, so I don't want to be able to, my neighbors to be able to hear me screaming at my kids. Right. Low impact development actually treats the water on site through biological ponds. You know, it's the way God created the earth. Ponds are supposed to have bog plants, floating plants, that actually take the nitrogen and the phosphorus out of the water, and so that it's clean as it percolates through and gets to the aquifer. So, yes, sir.
So we can do
Yes,
everything
ma'am.
we try and keep it down, but this is a state issue. Would they pick up any kind of initiative for lowering?
Yes. The governor is actually pretty proactive on this. He's the one that created the Indian, he didn't create it. He appointed Dr. DeWayne DeFreeze to the Indian River Lagoon Council, who is probably the leading authority in the United States. It's not just a Florida issue, though. Remember how I started that from the West Coast to Maine, they're seeing the same thing. We don't know how to handle our stormwater. We don't know how to treat all the sewage that we stop going to the bathroom. That would help. But it's probably not going to happen. So we need to handle it differently. And there are ways. There's a way right now. There's a private company called Reovation that has a biological filter that they can drop in septic systems that take. Has anybody opened a septic tank and looked inside? Beautiful sight, right? They put this filter in there, and what comes out a foot away from the other end is clear water. Now, you probably don't want to drink it. It removes the nitrogen, and it's like an aquarium tank. It runs on biology. It runs on beneficial bacteria. It's inexpensive. I've spent 6 months going to the DEP in Florida trying to get this company a permit to put it in. I still don't have it. Now they're told, well, we're actually going to give you funding, but it's probably going to take 18 months. I went to DeWayne DeFreeze. I went to Speaker Renner, and I said, look, here's the system. Can we? And Renner looked at it and says, my God, why aren't we doing this right now? It would save the state $1 trillion in forcing people from septic tanks to sewer and do a better job, because when it goes to the sewer, we still got to dump all that somewhere. It's going into the Indian River Lagoon. It's going into the aquifer, and I'm way out of time. I'm sorry. But thank you for your questions. Thank you for being here. Please don't give up.